All right, guys. So first of all, I want to tell you, thank you for joining me on this little, whatever I'm doing here. But what I want to say is, before there are any, this might be some trigger warning stuff to you guys. This content is a little different from anything I've done. It's going to touch up on some things that may not sit well with people, but I'm okay with that because I'm letting you know up front. One of my best friends in the world is a white guy. Okay, so I'm not prejudiced or racist in any kind of way. And I also want to say that I grew up in Rogers Park. I was born in Hyde Park and raised in Rogers Park. In those two areas, there was a lot of diversity. I grew up around a lot of different types of people. So I'm just pointing out how I grew up. Make of it what you will. I don't mean to offend anyone. This is just my story, and I just want to tell it. And yeah, so that you know, born in Hyde Park, raised in Rogers Park, lived in Skokie afterwards. And this is going to be an ongoing series, and it's going to be all over the place, so you know, because my memory's all over the place with this. And I just want to try to put everything out there so that you guys understand and know my perspective of where I lived, where I came from, why I am the way I am, and hopefully shed a little light on Rogers Park, Chicago, the friends I had, the people I encountered. So stay tuned, watch all of them. It should be interesting. All right, peace. Hey, while I got your attention, if you're from Chicago, make some comments, ask me some questions. Let's talk about it, because this series is going to go on and on according to all the things I can remember. I'm going to tell you about the sculpture I made on the beach of Pratt with some other friends, tell you about my Boy Scout days, tell you about my Kilmer, my Sullivan days, all of that. Alberto's Pizza, everything. Howard Street, Morris, Rogers Park, Pratt, Devon, Sheridan to Clark. Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Clement and this is Traveling That's What's Up. Alright, so today I'm going to talk about growing up Chicago, growing up in Chicago, So I was born back in the 70s. I grew up in the 80s. On the south side of Chicago was where I was born, in a place called Billings Hospital. Hyde Park, as a matter of fact. I actually used to live in the same neighborhood as Obama. To be quite frank, I lived around the corner from Obama. Yeah. And my parents, they were subject to all the things that happened during those times, the drugs, the poverty, all that stuff. And my dad, like most young men, teenagers at that time, he had hung out with a group, or joined a group called the Arukans. And they were a pretty powerful group. I remember going to, the Buck Billigan Day parade, and the family reunions, and the softball games. And these are all the things I remember growing up in Chicago. And since then, a lot has changed. A lot has gentrified. Of course, we're talking more than 35, 40 years ago. And that's pretty much how it's been. So, not to get too far into it, even though my parents have long since passed, it was an interesting time, very interesting. Now, as a kid in Chicago, I had lots of fun. We used to open up the fire hydrant, stick a stick in there, and let the water spray all over the place. And my dad, being influential at the time, You know, he had lots of money. You know, he rode with a really popular gang, or I don't know if it was a gang. I don't want to say that because that's wrong. It was more or less a bunch of individuals trying to make things right in a sense. Maybe they were, I don't know. I was just a toddler for the most part. But what I do remember is going to the store with those food stamps and being embarrassed as a kid. One thing I also remember is when I did go to those stores, I used to see a lot of Arabs. You know, they ran the stores back then too, which is no problem. You don't know any better. You know, you do what you got to do. And I seen a lot of things growing up, you know, from people losing their lives, you know, and people going back and forth to jail, all kinds of things. So there's a lot to cover. Growing up, you know, we had like community, you know. You used to go outside, and if your parents weren't around, your neighbors would discipline you or watch you. That's how it used to be, you know, when we were connected. Also, it felt more together. People felt more as a unit, as opposed to now, you know. Seems so disconnected. Another one of the things I remember growing up in Chicago was going to the fort. The fort was a place that they organized for us, and people were partying at the fort. You know, it was different, you know, because all the kids would go there from the neighborhoods, and you know, we'd have a good time. There would be parties, and you know, they did a lot of stuff for the neighborhood. You know, the crew that my dad ran around with. You know, they had their hands on everything, and you know, I grew up with some money after a while, you know, because after that time passed and my dad got more involved, we started having lots of money. I mean, lots of money. And kind of got me used to having money. Yeah. And since my parents were still kids pretty much themselves at the time, my mom and dad used to give me like whatever I wanted because they were never home. And this is part of like what was happening when we were growing up in Chicago. And a lot of things have changed since then, of course. So these days, I don't see that anymore. You know, people are so discombobulated and broke up, and it's just a lot different than it was before. You know, it's not the same anymore. So that's another thing. And with that, you know, you have the destruction of families. And even though they were fun times, they were difficult times. You know, I've seen some things I'm not going to discuss on camera, but I've seen, you know, the drug use, what the drugs do to a person. I've seen families ripped apart by it. Mine was one of them. I've witnessed people get shot, die in front of me. I've gone to too many funerals in my life, you know. When someone naturally passes, I don't even like going to the funerals now because I've done too many of them as a kid. I remember one time I was out with my dad and he took me to one of his friend's house, and his friend had piranha. They had a human hand in the tank, and the piranha was just eating at it. I was a little kid, you know. I remember one time we went to go see one of my dad's friends, They had just shot him up, you know. He was dead in the car. They left him in the car. Shot all up. It was just crazy stuff. These type of things you shouldn't have to see when you're a kid, but I did. And because my parents were involved in illegal activities, I remember one time our house got raided. Actually, it wasn't our house. It was that whole entire building, you know. And I remember like I said, my parents were kids still themselves. I remember them sending me in the house to go retrieve the gun, and the gun went off, bounced all over the stove, went right past me, could have killed me. That's why I be thinking I'm the chosen one. It's been so many times I shouldn't even be here. I should actually, sometimes I wake up and I ask myself, what am I still doing here? Because I'm surprised myself. There's been so many near-death experiences. I remember I was in the alley in Rogers Park, standing next to my friend, and another friend, who I thought was a friend at the time, started shooting at us. He shot my one friend in the back of the leg. But the bullets was whizzing past us. Just really crazy stuff growing up in Chicago. I can remember playing with Ali's kids, Layla Ali, because my dad was friends with, you know, everybody. You know, when you're in Arucan, at that time, you were popular, you're famous, pretty much, because you rolled around protecting the hood, you know, doing what you needed to do, defying law, you know. Used to see Farrakhan a lot, go to the fort a lot, you know. Good times and bad times. Yep. Good times and bad times. There's so much stuff I can remember, but I'm trying to figure out if I should talk about it, but I don't know. Like I said, my parents are no longer here. So, but still, you know, the Arucans and my dad and all these guys had so many connections. There was a movie called Monkey Hustle that was recorded, filmed, and James Earl Jones was the director. And my parents actually got me in the movie, me and another friend, as extras. I was the kid with the blonde hair flipping in the street. And I remember going to the screening. It was so many black people in the audience at the movie theater. I was tripped out. It's my, you know, I was in a movie and I didn't even, you know, realize it. Because I was a kid, being a kid, you know. I remember going to Operation Push, seeing Jesse Jackson all the time. They used to hand out the blocks of cheese. Crazy stuff. I also remember when Jesse Jackson changed the name of black people to African American, that made up term. You know, as far as being American, you know, I got so many Indian people in my family back in Mississippi on my mom and dad's side. We're Indian. We're black and Indian, or Indian and black, or whatever you want to call it. But it's true. People don't want to hear it. People don't want to believe it. But if they were to toss everybody out this country and only left the original people, I would still be here. And that brings me to, how do people come to this country, haven't even become citizens yet, and have the nerve, rather, to be prejudiced or racist? Can't even speak English. I can't even do that well, but anyway. Still, how can people who don't even speak the language still be here and talk crazy. It's ridiculous to me. Very ridiculous. Because that's the way it is. You know? I look at that and I'm not like I don't really read too much into it. But as of lately, you can't help but think about it now. Because it's so fresh. It's on everyone's mind. You know? I remember I wanted to be a police officer when I was a kid, probably in the 5th grade. I was in Boy Scouts in Rogers Park. And that's when I stopped wanting to be a police officer. I seen some, criminal activities, and I tried to be a good Samaritan. You remember, I'm only like, I don't know, I'm in the 5th grade or so. I tried to tell the cop, hey, the guy went this way or this happened. The police grabbed me and kicked me in my ass and threw me in the car. It was tripped out. You know, that's when I stopped wanting to be a police officer. I said, to hell with that. And then all my friends I grew up with, some of them became police officers. And they're some bad people. So, yeah. It just made me think long and hard about it. You know, growing up in Chicago, it's just, I don't know, crazy stuff. But it made me who I am, you know. Golly, it's hot out here. Oh yeah, it's open. So we're in Target now, guys. We're just gonna grab some cream. Hey, where's your cream at? Like dairy cream. All right, thank you. All right, guys, I'm getting right back to you. Yeah, so I had to go get some heavy whipping cream while I was out walking. Hopefully it don't spoil. I'm so far. I didn't ride today. I walked. I've been walking. You know, getting my steps every day. So, at my age, you got to get your steps. You got to do some type of exercise. But back to Chicago. So, you know, growing up in Chicago, it's not an easy thing to do. You know, because it was still racism back then. It's still racism now. And I've never seen, and I can't understand, I mean, I guess I understand why one race works so hard to keep another race down. And then they feed this garbage to the other foreigners that come over here. And it's just crazy. And now if you look at social media, they got blacks and Africans against each other. And I understand that too, because as a black man in America, black American, I can see where the disconnect is going. You cannot pass off our struggles and everything that black Americans have gone through and just hand it to someone else. And this has been the thing. Trying to like wash us out. I don't even know what that's about. Sometimes I wonder if it's fear. Because why else would you do something like that? Unless you, I mean, is it fear? I don't know. Now I promise I'm gonna get back on living in Chicago, but this is something I wanted to talk about. When I was in Hawaii, you know, we were doing all the tours and all of those things. And on one of our tours, they started talking about a blood quantum. You know, because I had asked the question, why are there so many tents on the beach and in the parks in Hawaii? Because I didn't understand it. I thought everybody was camping. But I found out they weren't camping. They were homeless people in Hawaii. Come to find out, they were the Hawaiians. The Hawaiians are homeless in Hawaii, which is crazy. You know? How does that happen? You know, things are so backwards. You know? We need fair and just. You know, it's not fair, and it's not, there's no justice. You know, one day it's all gonna come to a head. It's gonna erupt, and when it does, there's gonna be hell to pay. People underestimate the power of anger and desperateness. When people don't have anything else to lose, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a lot of shit because people don't have anything to lose and everything to gain. So that's going to be an issue. That's going to be a huge issue, you know? So I think about that quite often, because I see the writing on the wall. But back to Chicago anyway. You know, so growing up here, you got all the different gangs. You know, I don't know them all anymore. You know, never joined. Just, I don't know, my thing. The reason why I didn't join any gangs of Chicago is because I love the women. And the first time I heard about, I even thought about it for a second. They told me you got to get jumped in, which meant you got to get beat up. And if you got in, you had to get beat up to get out. So I was really like, no. This will never be for me. I don't know what's going on here. Guy just hit the curb and started arguing with his wife in the car, in the van. Have no idea what that's about. But anyway, I never joined the gangs because getting beat up to get in, getting beat up to get out, that was already bad. Then you had to pay dues to be in the gang. So you got to make money and give it to somebody. Get out of here. That's crazy. Who does that? It's crazy. Then they were like, you can't go to this hood, you can't go to that hood. That was it. So I never had any interest in joining any gangs or anything like that, because there wasn't going to be anything that was going to stop me from visiting all these women. You know, a young man, I had Spanish girlfriends, Asian girlfriends, black girlfriends, Jamaican girlfriends. I had all kinds of girlfriends. So I couldn't be in a gang because I needed to visit all of those beautiful women. I need to be able to go to everybody's hood. I mean, that couldn't be me. Pan, getting beat up to get in, getting beat up to get out. No. Would never work for me. So that's one of the things in Chicago. Then there's colors of your clothes. You know, you can't wear certain colors in certain areas. You can't have your hat this way or that way. All that kind of nonsense was, nah. I had friends that were in gangs, you know. One time I even got jumped on for having friends being associated. Like, I had two friends. One was like a Latin King. Another one was disciple folks or whatever they call it. And, you know, I can't get it right these days because there's like so many variations of GDs or folks or vice, whatever it is, you know, insanes and this and that. There's so many different, I don't know. But because I was friends with one guy, the other guy wanted to jump on me because he seen me hanging out with him. That didn't work out too well though, you know. But just not my thing, you know. I don't like being told I can't do something, I can't go somewhere. And I'm definitely not gonna hand nobody my money. I mean, you got me really messed up. You think you're gonna put your hands on me? You're gonna take my money. Oh, I'm gonna give it to you rather? No, 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 no. I'd rather not even indulge. Not my thing. So that's another thing. And then there, you know, the cops. The cops, I don't know, they need training. They really need training. You know, they a lot of bad cops. A lot of bad cops. You know, it's terrible. And this is, you know, with bad cops and racism, that never works out. You know, they abuse their power. And then, you know, they don't care. They don't do anything about it. Zero. It's just another day. And then you got these bootlicking black cops who watch the other cops beat up on black people without intervening. Because they're trying to get brownie points. They're house. That's what they call them. I don't use that word, but that's what they are. You know, unfortunately. That's what they are. They got let in the house. Now they think, you know, they're part of the franchise. You know, they're not. They're using you to police us. You're a fool too. But we do have to have them on the force because there are some good ones. It's not enough of them though, but there are some good ones. You know, so it's a crazy, crazy place living in Chicago with all the segregation that goes on. You know, it's always been like that, and it'll probably always be like that. Because like anybody, most people don't give a care about anything unless it lands on their front doorstep, you know? So in Chicago, you know, you got the high prices, you got the racism, you got the crime. It's a lot of stuff. You got poverty, you got drugs. It's a lot of stuff. And it was tough and it was easy at the same time. You know, I remember in my graffiti writing days getting chased. Oh man. But I love being a Chicagoan. You know, being from Chicago has been dope. You know, had I lived somewhere else besides Chicago, I probably wouldn't be the way I am. So I'm glad I was raised in Chicago. You know, it's an eye-opening place. It's the way it is. So if you're gonna come here, just know you're gonna face some racism, some prejudice. You're gonna have foreigners that can't speak English and they're gonna be prejudiced and racist too because they picked up on the white way. You know, so you got that. It's not all bad, but unfortunately, anytime you have racists and bigotry, you're gonna have problems. That's just the way it is. You're gonna always have those kind of issues. When people don't have respect, you know, it's just like that. You know, that's why, you know, racism and bigotry has to end. Because it causes more problems, you know. And it makes us look bad as a country. Like we don't have our stuff together, you know. All these many years and we're still doing the racism thing, we're still doing the bigotry thing. It's like, have we learned anything? Apparently not. You know, but that's Chicago and the rest of the country. It's just the way it is. You know? We're gonna pick this back up for part 2. I hope you enjoy it, guys, you know. Like, share, and subscribe if you like the content. You know, as a Boy Scout, it was a lot of fun being in Chicago, being as a Boy Scout. I perfected some of my cooking skills. What else? I learned how to, get along with other people. I learned about other people, other cultures, and discipline. A lot of great things came out of being a Boy Scout. It made me more tolerable to other people and other ways of life. So it was really good being a Boy Scout. And I was a Boy Scout for a very long time. I mean, I loved it, being a Boy Scout, because it taught me a lot, So I can look at things from a pretty good perspective. And, a lot of differences. There's a lot of space in between us as people. And we keep broadening the gap with all the nonsense that we allow. It's like there are people who want things to happen, bad things, which is extra crazy to me. What are we gonna do? Everywhere has gotten dangerous. We live in a place where if you step on someone's shoes, you might wind up unalived. It's a crazy world. People get in their cars and plow people down. Crazy stuff. Police officers are allowed to break the law without any consequences. These are crazy times. And it's 2025. That's what's so weird, You would think we've come so far. We should be so much better off because of what time it is in the world. But we're not. We're no further than we were 30 years ago. So, I don't know.